Anand, we can start right now.
All right,
we can start.
So is there any introduction by anybody else, or should I just start?
You can start, Anand.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, all, and welcome to the another round of Wednesday seminar of the Institute of Chinese Studies. In fact, because Jenny is new here, this is one of the oldest traditions of the ICS that it has gone uninterrupted ever since the ICS has come into existence. So we have this weekly seminars, and especially post-pandemic, we have shifted the seminars into online mode. So that also helps people who are away from India, who cannot be in Delhi, to make presentations. What we are going to speak, what we are going to hear from Jenny today is an extremely interesting and very engaging topic. Before actually moving on to get her views and talk about this interesting book, which was published at the beginning of the pandemic, if I'm not wrong, in 2020. Just two incidents quickly to bring to up to speed and to get them to actually relate with what Jenny is going to speak today. In December last year, towards the tail end of December, toward the end of the year, there was a massive protest by women workers of Foxconn facility in Sriperumbudur in Chennai. The women workers had come out on the roads and blocking the main accessway or the main highway to Bangalore. And their demands was the pitiable living and sanitary conditions they had to work in the Foxconn facility. And also the question about very unsanitary conditions also in terms of to which many of them also had to consume food which was found not to be in good condition, and many of them had to be hospitalized. So this was one of the main problems last year. Similarly, last year, again in the month of December, in Bangalore, in Wistron facility, which again workers went on rampage, and there was massive violence on the factory floor, which led to even police and law enforcement officials coming into the factory premises. This was on account of wage arrears. Now, both these incidents, what they indicate are how these are in facilities which have been producing Apple products, whether it is Wistron or Foxconn, and how the conditions and how the happenings in a way, or in many ways, mirror happenings in the electronics industry in China, of which a large part is Foxconn. Foxconn, we have been hearing about Foxconn and labor contention in Foxconn through various ways, whether it be through labor worker suicides, which was the major focus in the early 2010s. There have been another strand of Foxconn was forced student internships where students from vocational institutions had to be on the assembly line without proper labor protection or even any safeguards. There were concerns on environment. So various strands of Foxconn and on suppliers, especially the Taiwanese suppliers producing for Foxconn and big brands, it has always been under scrutiny. But perhaps for the first time, all these strands were collated and encapsulated, and we were all encompassed into this wonderful book authored by Jenny and her co-authors Pun Ngai and Mark Selden, which appeared in 2020. It is an absolute wonderful book, which I had the opportunity to, of course, review. So I won't, of course, tell details of what the readings of the book are. The book is out. It is very accessible. It is, of course, written in what makes the book really landmark is that not only does it cover all issues, but it is centered around the lived experiences of young rural migrant workers in China, who actually are the critical engines in this giant production machine of global brands, which are now which are working out through offshore facilities and offshore manufacturing in China. This also books connects not only Foxconn. Of course, the Foxconn is the main supplier. It talks about the intertwined relationship between Foxconn and Apple, what on their parallel lives and how their interests and business models converge. And it also, on the other hand, is the tight symbiotic relationship with Foxconn with the Chinese party state. So all in all, this book is an extremely valuable, extremely rich in ethnography, very in-depth research, and great scholarly work, which is very accessible in a language which is not even full of jargons. I mean, that is one commendable work with research. And so it's rich in detail. So I would not waste any more of your time. Without further ado, let me hand it over to Dr. Jenny Chan. Dr. Jenny Chan is an assistant professor at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and her work on labor is seminal. This, I believe, is Jenny's first work, but she has also been doing a lot of work on gig work and platform economy, especially now. Her work deals with logistics workers in China and food delivery workers, which also is an extension of her work, which she has been doing with Foxconn and the electronic industry. So that is some of her real work. I have had the opportunity to be in conversation with Jenny for a while now. So it's really interesting, and I really look forward, as are others in this room, to your conversation. Over to you, Jenny.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your great introduction. I still remember in 2018, we first met each other in the Association for Asian Studies meetings. Yes. And over these years, we keep some communications, and more recently, you also received the interview from a Taiwanese media and talk about Foxconn conditions in India. That is the fabulous work you have been doing. So I feel really honored and my great pleasure to be with all of you today. So I'm now based in Hong Kong, and in the next about half an hour, I will summarize the book. Any of your thoughts, questions, comments are most welcome. So I will have time to learn from you as well. So I had already prepared the PowerPoint slide. And so now I will share my screen and make sure that we will see each other. Okay? So if everyone could hear me clearly, I would now get started. I will give a background about why we did the book. This had been taken us about more than 10 years. It has been not expected at the very first time. When I did my PhD studies in London University, then I have been teaching in Oxford University in the UK before I finally go back home in Hong Kong. So this book had been taking me 10 years to do it with my two mentors, Pun Ngai and Mark Selden. So we will have a deeper discussion in the context of the global electronics production, particularly the Apple and Foxconn supply chain. And our concern is about workers' power, the labor politics in contemporary China. Then I will open up and hear what you have, your comments or feedback. To give the background, is about the globalization, the global production. So in the 1960s, corporations like IBM became outsourcing to have the components or assembly done in the factories overseas in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. And when China opened up, things have been changing quite rapidly in the context of East Asia. So China's opened up and have the market reforms since the late 1970s. During the last 2 decades of the last century, just the beginning of a new 21st century, following China's accession to the World Trade Organization a year ago, so in 2001. And according to some statistics, since 2002, foreign capital, including Asian capital, has achieved dominance in medium and high-tech industries, and they generate over 80% of the country's export value in these industries. So new jobs are actually created in the large cities and smaller towns. And we have been witnessing the massive rural to urban labor migration within China. These migrant workers become the most important members within the factory of the world. They are the one who makes our clothes, our handbags, and iPhones. So within the global electronics supply chain, some would argue that this is a triple win development trajectory. So win-win-win. Have the global production system in place. And that is, first of all, good for the TNCs, the transnational corporations. They will gain higher profits when they outsource the low value add assembly jobs elsewhere, not done in-house. And this is also good for workers who are employed by these companies or their suppliers. Why? Because then workers will get better jobs and higher wages. Finally, it's for you and myself. We, the consumers, we can buy cheaper products of a wide varieties. Wow, I like a pink color, black color, all different kinds of models of the iPhones. But is that the truth, the facts? So today I'm going to take this and to challenge the thesis about the triple win conception of development. What about the workers in China? Are they really benefit from corporate-led globalization? I have such a great honor to share with you what we found in the book. And thank you so much for bringing me in. Besides our book, I would highly recommend a companion. And this is a review done by Annette in Economic and Political Weekly more than half a year ago. And he really writes a comprehensive review, and we are very grateful for all he has done. So dying for an iPhone have a double meaning. On the one hand, a new generation of Chinese workers is struggling to assemble iPhones, while consumers around the group queue up to buy the newest models. So it's the two sides of the same coin, production and consumption. But there are tensions here. We cannot wait. We cannot wait even for one more month for the latest models of the iPhone. And workers are doing day and night to just keep up with the production schedule to satisfy the global consumers' demand. More than 10 years ago, in 2010, 18 workers attempted suicide at one company, and that is Foxconn in China. Unfortunately, 14 of them died. Only 4 survived, but with crippling injuries, severely handicapped. They are young. They all range in age between 17 and 25. And all of them are those who are moving out from the countryside to the cities to look for a new way of life, to have the high hope in improving their own family conditions, to support their younger siblings, to also help reducing the family burden of their aging parents. So these are the new generation of the Chinese rural migrants. Instead of finding out why these young people kill their lives, they are so young, should be hopeful and energetic. But instead of finding out what happened, the management only set up the safety net to catch the jumpers. But does it really help saving lives? As we dig deeper on the internet, we find out a worker's blog. And here is the translation. The worker writes, the use of death is simply to testify that we were ever alive at all, and that while we lived, we had only despair. For this worker, only hopelessness and desperation while living in this world. Some time later, we met with a suicide survivor. She was only 17 when she jumped from the Foxconn dormitory from the 4th floor to the ground. After 12 days of losing consciousness, quite a miracle, she awoke, but only find out that from the waist down, she became paralyzed. She will no longer be able to stand up. Forever, she might be on the wheelchair or on the bed. So later on, when she lost all the working ability, she was just sent back home from where she was from. And it was a poor, small village in the central part of China. Quite some months in the hospital, she regained some confidence and trust in us. So at that time, I was still doing my PhD studies, and together, there are also some other students and faculty members from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China. So we interviewed her, and we find out that she had been working in one of the business groups within Foxconn, and that is called IDPBG, Integrated Digital Product Business Group. Within Foxconn, there are more than a dozen of these kind of business groups who are competing against time and fighting for highest product quality at a high efficiency and high labor productivity to just meet the deadline. When they win, they will get some bonus. Otherwise, they will get severely punished because they will be deemed working for too slow. And after a month of work, she couldn't get her wage in time. And without parents or friends around, her mind just become blank. And then she jumped from the fourth floor. I want to highlight that this is not just an individual issue or a personal trouble. Within China, with 1.4 billion people, nearly 300 millions of young workers like her have been taking up jobs in the factories, in the surface workplace, or on the construction site all over China. And her story would be also reflect on the life struggles of these young migrants. So this is a collective investigation. It is not just my own dissertation. Between then 2010, with the 18 young worker suicides and until the outbreak of COVID-19 at the end of 2019, almost like 10 years, we have been talking to dozens of workers, interview them, and they also share with us their poetries, songs, open letters, petition letters, photos, and videos. So we have been verifying all these different research information, and we gather the interview and other field observation, field notes, and put together into this book. So the information itself are really credible. We have got the evidence and supplemented with other meetings with the managers as well as government officials, including trade union members. We write up the book finally. There are two aims. One, to assess the extent to which the Chinese states and these global corporations like Apple fulfilled their responsibilities to protect workers in the context of transnational production. So whether they are fulfilling their own responsibility, like legal protection or the corporate responsibility program, does it work? And the second, and possibly the more important goal, is to inspire, to educate, to mobilize all of us to support a new round of global labor struggles through collaborative efforts. So what is Foxconn? Foxconn is headquartered in Taiwan, in Taipei. And since the late 1980s, when China opened up Taiwan, then also invest Taiwanese entrepreneurs, they also invest in China. And nowadays, Foxconn indeed has its huge production size, not only within Taiwan or China, but like India, and also in former Eastern Europe, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, and also North and South America. According to their official labor force number, China, including Taiwan and Hong Kong, still remains as the largest production base. At one point of time, it's actually more than 1 million. Now, is like lowering the workforce because of the use of robots and other automation technologies. But still, you can tell when compared to those who are based in Europe or Americas, China, Greater China, still have the largest production base. So Foxconn, their headquarters is in Taiwan. We just mentioned it. And they also have a different name in Taiwan, but everyone might be a little bit more familiar with their logo or their brand name as Foxconn. So Foxconn is a major producer, a supplier of Apple, but it's more than that. These of the big names like Sony, HP, Dow, you can name of are also the customers of Foxconn. So they are actually producing a whole wide range of electronics products, including our tablets, our MacBook, Kindles, or PlayStations, the game console. Apple remains as the biggest buyer of Apple's product. They are two separate independent companies, but indeed they are closely linked and intertwined in product development, engineering, research, manufacturing processes, logistics, sales, and after-sales services. They're just like twins. And Apple indeed have lots of intervention in terms of the production processes or the quality assurance procedure. Until that time, when the suicide broke out, Foxconn in the entire world was the only or the exclusive supplier of iPhones and the original iPads. Within Foxconn, you can see from this graphic, it is a very typical hierarchical model. It's a pyramid with the production workers as well as the student interns. Our chair, Annette, already introduced briefly about the interns who are recruited from vocational schools in the names of internship. They are at the bottom. And then you could see the mid-level managers, and on the top is the CEO, the president, the GM, the general manager. Foxconn is a keen follower of so-called the scientific management model, and that is known by Frederick Taylor or Taylorism. So what does this American mechanical engineer emphasize? The very complicated or complex production procedure, which could be broken down into very tiny, small, repetitive production process. So you just need to put some screws on the printed circuit board, or you just have to wrap up this box or put on the barcode. These are the simple things. You don't even need a day of training to get the work done. This could eliminate some time or to speed up the entire process. But then what would be the impact on human beings? Workers always feel under high pressure, because if you work just a second below the target, then after a minute or an hour, you will be far lag behind. So you are always being chased after to work, and still work. Nowadays, maybe we are celebrating to have iPhone 12 Pro or even iPhone Model 13. So this is indeed an important concept that we have to understand. It is not just about the mistreatment of workers on the shop floor. It is all about the global electronics supply chain. And here it is a buyer-driven model. Apple controls the prices and dictates the delivery time. Intense pressures have been built up. Take a look. Within this global division of labor, the returns are highly uneven. We can compare all these big companies, and you can tell the yellow bar, Apple had the largest gross revenue in their pocket. And even in terms of the profit margin, Apple is really big. Apple enjoying the fat profit. And then Samsung, the Korean brand, also doing very good. And Foxconn have very thin margin. So despite the fact that Foxconn have a large volume of orders from Apple and all over the world, Chinese brands and the Western brands, but indeed the value add or the profit taken by Foxconn is very tiny, very slim. Here, we didn't include Amazon, but even if Amazon is considered, the results would be the same. According to some classification, Apple is not counted as an electronics or tech company, but as an internet service and retailer, a global internet service provider. So now, besides the profit and revenue gain by those companies, we can take iPhone as an example. This is to be gonna very clear and more concrete. Let's say if an Apple iPhone is selling at $100 US, Apple will got the lion's share, is more than 58%. The raw materials is just about 1/4 of the total selling price. And then other suppliers, they are producing the chips or more high-end components, they got about 14%. How about workers in China and elsewhere? The labor cost in assembly that is so low that not even up to 2% of the selling price of an Apple iPhone. And here we can also see how Apple's purchasing practice will have direct influence on workers. This is what is known as the fluctuation in terms of the order, the booms and the busts. The fluctuation of the orders, coupled with the very tight delivery schedule, directly shift the production pressure from these global buyers like Apple to Foxconn and other smaller suppliers in transnational manufacturing. There are two implications here. When iPhone is selling so many to global consumers during the Christmas time or other festivals, the demand suddenly build up. And the two implications are that on the one hand, workers have to do work day and night to put in many excessive compulsory overtime working hours so as to meet the deadline. You cannot just bring in many people suddenly. So you just simply lengthen their working hours. And secondly, that is correct, even the existing workforce will not be enough. And therefore, students and other agency workers, temporary and more precarious or vulnerable workers are brought in. So these are the short-term labor force, the flexible labor force who enjoy no economic security. And these are the basic labor force pattern and characteristic we can spot based on our years of research. We will not have time to watch the YouTube, the documentary we did and then upload onto the YouTube. But here, within the documentary that is done by me and two other friends undercover, you will see how the new factory of an iPad factory that is running by Foxconn and the conditions there in 2011. To get some more voices from the workers, here is one of the interviews. I screw the screws without a break. Each screw turns diligently, but they can't turn around our future. It's like you put lots of work, but without any hope for or prospect of advancement. And this is even a more moving poetry that we find, and that is written by a young male Foxconn worker who committed suicide some years later in 2014. A screw fell to the ground. In the stark light of overtime, hanging vertically, lightly clinking, it won't attract anyone's attention just like last time on a light like this, when someone punched to the ground. It is a metaphor. When he recalled some years ago the train of suicides, someone fell to the ground, but no one noticed. No one even paid attention to the human lives. So this is a very tragic story. These young people, they lost their hope. Suicide involved an intensely personal and social struggle on the part of the individual. They live home alone. Most of the time, they cannot afford to bear with their parents, boyfriends, girlfriends, let alone their children. So the city is where migrant workers cannot stay in, and the village they can't return to. They no longer know how to do farm work, or agriculture will not bring them a more decent life either. While the time they cannot see the prospect to move forward, they become trapped and feeling really deep inside their psychological well-being and struggle. But what you cannot see even more visibly are these hidden labor force. They are the interns. So I took a photo here during one of the field trips. And these young people, they are coming from all over China in the vocational or technical schools because of the demand, global demand for iPhones and iPads. That well, of course, there are also computers, keyboards, game consoles, and so on. So Foxconn's workers are really in strong need. And how to make the shortage or the problem being solved, they then make a deal with the vocational schools. And the schools are sending in hundreds or thousands of students. But are they interns or are they the cheap workers? During the summer of 2010, Foxconn had 150,000 of interns from all over China that make up about 15% of their million-strong workforce. And these interns, they major in healthcare, car repair, even like computer studies, all different studies they are having, but they receive no skill training, no relevant skill training at all when they are just doing assembly work day and night. And compulsory overtime work, day and night alternate shift, 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, is all the violation of the Chinese labor law and regulations. This is indeed involuntary or kind of forced labor. Every day is just like a repetition of one or two simple motions, like a robot, and that is being said by a student who is as young as 16 years old. So working on the line, living in the factory dormitory, they must comply with the Foxconn internship program, or otherwise they will not graduate on time. So this is a deep collusion right here. It is not just about Foxconn who violate the labor law, but indeed the local governments, including educational bureau, they are asking the schools to fulfill the student quota. Otherwise, I will not give you the educational fund. And therefore, you cannot buy computers or improve the campus conditions. So it is right here, the triple alliance between Foxconn, the company, the schools, as well as the local government. If I just stop here, it is a very depressing talk that I'm giving. But on the other hand, I would like to highlight workers, including students and younger ones, they have been standing up to go on a strike, despite the fact that they are not protected at all. And indeed, sometimes they are being detained, arrested, or even prosecuted, imprisoned for disrupting the social order, or more seriously, endanger national security. And beyond Foxconn, there have been thousands of cases every year that can be tracked from the social media. And one of the NGOs, non-governmental organizations in Hong Kong, China Neighbor Bulletin, they have been building an interactive map. If those of you who are interested, you can always check from the online map and understand there are protests and strikes that are happening all over China, not only along the coastal region, but the inland areas. Workers, when they done their tool, when they stand up to fight, they can negotiate with the management, and sometimes they also gain the hard-won victories. They have some concessions, like if their overtime wages are not paid, then they will be given like maybe 70% or 80%. Then this could be considered a victory, because sometimes it's really hard. Without trade union protection, workers are all relying on their own power to fight back. And the union, or more accurately, the company union that is dominated by both the government as well as the management. So now let me be brief. Here it is the Communist Party, the party state, the Chinese government, and then the union is part of the state. It is not independent, and the central command or the line of authorities like that, Foxconn will then have a union, but this union must be registered under the All China Federation of Trade Union, which is the only official trade union within China. So both the party states and the management prevent the emergencies of autonomous unions. They are in the name of economic and political stability. The ACFTU, or China Federation of Trade Unions, it has actually monopolized the institution of worker representation across all levels, at the central level, at the grassroots and enterprise level. So yeah, you see, I am always mixed. Like sometimes it's like repression, depression, but on the other hand, there are also hopes. And how about us consumers, or whether we can have the campaigns in support of workers? Otherwise, they would be really like the slave. We got iPhone, iPad, and we also got iSlave. So Foxconn, with government collusion, have been violating laws and regulations. And consumers now, like us, the activists, the researchers in Hong Kong, together with some more progressive trade unions, we are organizing the campaigns outside the Apple store and to call for media attention. This is our message, the end to iSlavery. And because there have been explosions, fires, toxic chemicals within Foxconn, we also call for safety, the healthy and safe conditions at work. That is the fundamental human rights and labor rights. So we have been also organizing some dramas and taking street actions in Hong Kong to arouse public awareness or attention. In Taiwan, we are very grateful for their support as well. As we mentioned, Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. So at the peak of the suicide tragedy, they also organized the protest outside Foxconn headquarters, and they laid down the banner, "What is the price of flesh and blood?" And the banner, a smaller one, you can also see those of you who know Chinese or translate here, their dreams shattered. In Mexico, there are also activists and trade unions who echo the global solidarity call. And this is another YouTube clip you can find, and that is done by a group based in Mexico and US. These young people, they hold up the poster that bears the names of those Foxconn workers who died in 2010. And at the center, you can see the iPad now being renamed as a death pad, and the Chinese character says, "Workers want justice." How about the companies? Over the 10 years, they have been also responding. Like Apple and other companies, they care about the workers, and they have expanded their corporate social responsibility team. They enforce their corporate code of conduct, no matter for what, their image, to polish their image, or to try to stabilize a bit within their supply chain. And we still have to do a lot more monitoring. But just give you an example, when Apple joined the Fair Labor Association in 2012, because of the internal, the domestic, as well as the global pressure, Foxconn indeed bring in more young workers into their company union. And they also provide some like dances, sports competitions, or even a wedding ceremony to bring in these young people to give them some social lives or entertainment. But the impact is a little bit limited because fundamentally workers cannot find their collective voice or their union representation on the shop floor. And later on, some years ago, Apple also withdrawn its membership from the Fair Labor Association. So I want to summarize now and conclude. We have to go beyond the Apple Foxconn supply chain. It is the industry-wide solution that we have to find. It is not just about Apple, HP, Dell, Google, Samsung, all these big companies. They had also mainly rely on their suppliers to build their products. So unless workers themselves have the voice and the mechanism to give feedback and to fight for a fair share of their work and have the decent employment, the tragedies will just repeat. So between the individual and collective or institutional consumers, there are still some other options and possibilities of change. universities could use their collective buying power to influence the practices, to demand these companies to respect workers' rights in their supply chain. Labor capital and state, the interrelationship is very complicated, and it has been changing in the China's rise over the past 40 years or so. And in this book, we have seen how concentration of capital, let's say in the hands of Foxconn, that have been becoming so influential and powerful that workers becomes like the slaves building the iPhones and iPads. And this is like oligopoly. It is not a monopoly. Foxconn they also face competitions from Precitronics and other companies, but we see the trend. These companies are not being easily replaced. They become more powerful, and it is still dependent on Apple's order. But likewise, Apple also dependent on Foxconn. You cannot find a replacement easily. And within the specific context of China, we can see from state-owned foreign invest and privately owned enterprises, the Chinese party state had expanded its control to so-called achieve national objectives, no matter it is economic stability, common prosperity, or political stability, but that is also, in a way, suppressing worker protest. You can see in that year when suicide became the headline in the local and international media, China also spent a lot more on domestic public security. That means paying for the police, the riot police, to buy the equipment, the tools, and that had already overtaken the expenses on national defense. So how important are these implications in terms of workers' freedom or their rights, as well as the NGOs and activists? The space for civil society are actually shrinking, but still, I want to make a call here. We have to educate and mobilize worker and consumer. We have our power, and we can support workers to fight against the exploitation and abuses in this age of authoritarianism. Our book, which was published in 2020, now also got it translated into Korean. And you can see the cover here, the falling petals, the falling leaves, which symbolize the loss of lives. That is very tragic. But on the other hand, from another angle, we really want the consumers in Korea and other places of the world, we will get the message and we will reflect on our relationship with the electronic device we use every day, including the laptop I'm now using to do this presentation. I got connected with our friends in ICS in India. So that is important. We are not going back to a very backward age, a stone age. We are in a time of a technological revolution, but how to make the production more humane and just and fair, that is the crucial challenge and the message that we want to put across. So thank you very much. My presentation is now finished, and I will stop sharing and we can have some more discussions.
Thank you, Jenny. It was really a very elaborate in a way, and also very great summary of a great book. I mean, a book which has a lot of details, but you have covered a very vast landscape in your presentation. I would urge everyone to buy the book. Yes, there's a cost concern, but definitely the book is worth the cost. I mean, it's really a tour de force, as I said in the review, which you kindly put out. So before we move on to the questions, I while reviewing the book, what I found very interesting are two things. I mean, there are various things to talk about the book, including some of the implications for India, especially given all these protests in supply factories in India. But a couple of things which I wanted to flag is one, which you also briefly mentioned in your presentation, was on this entire technology. I mean, as one starts talking about with Foxconn and now China is moving into the next stage of manufacturing of superconductors and semiconductors. There is some reliance that the technology is the great liberating force, and that will solve technology innovation. These are the buzzwords which will actually in a way liberate and get China into the next stage. But as you have pointed out in many spaces in the book, it's not so. I mean, the human agency is still on the assembly line. The minute parts of the phone, especially like an iPhone, which is really sleek devices, require the fine portions of the hand, and how workers have to really literally, because there are these time constraints, which you tight timelines and tight deadlines, which you have pointed out. Workers having to even take out their safety equipment and their gloves and having to literally use their hands to work on these devices, which in effect also makes them consume a lot of these toxic products and toxic air, toxic chemicals they have to deal with, and then there are health and health issues which really are serious. So the entire thing that the technology is a misnomer. I mean, you also point out on the Foxbots on how they are very limited. So that is one interesting aspect. The second aspect which I liked about the book, which is also interesting, is the fact that, of course, when you mention about the fact that the workers do not have any avenues or the very limited avenues for workers, this tremendous sense of alienation in this race to bottom, I mean, to quote the workers' precarious lives, the tremendous amount of alienation which workers do not find support. And there, what I really liked in that part of the book was you talking about these hidden injuries. So talking about family dislocations, social dislocations, workers having to live away from families and that affecting their family lives, increased cases of divorces, separations, workers finding no resources for to get over their trauma, get over their pain. Some interestingly turning over to religion, as you already said, some of them getting into churches and spending long hours of prayer. So those are actually very interesting things, which is not the real injuries or the cost, but what are the hidden costs or the hidden injuries is something which makes this work once more really fascinating. I mean, apart from all other aspects which are very nicely packed in, and you put out a very elaborate picture. So that is something which is really commendable. So thank you again for your presentation, and thank you again for the opportunity. I think we can move over to the questions. I think there is Ananta Giri who is there. I think he can move in with the first question. Ananta, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Dr. Chan. I passed by Hong Kong Polytech University in 2018, and it is very inspiring listening to you. I have three quick queries. One is, given the difficulties of organizing, what are still processes of organizing among the young people? And then the Foxconn workers in different countries are also facing through the same kind of challenges, and whether there is any transnational network of solidarity among Foxconn workers in different countries, and in the building of this solidarity, whether there is an alliance with other organizations, like as you are doing in Hong Kong and other human rights and human dignity organizations around the world. And my third quick query is, you very quickly refer to the word poetic voice, and I'm wondering, given that in Chinese tradition, there is a very deep significance of the poetic, and whether some of the protesting workers, including those who are facing depression, they write poems, and these poetic dimensions of both the experience of degradation as well as overcoming, and whether they read their poems together and sing together. So thank you for your kind attention.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for Anna's very thoughtful and careful reading about the book. And also thank you so much for Anetta, your 3 questions. These are all very important about organizing in China. That is always dangerous, even though nowadays we use social media. Because I still remember 10 years ago, the very first time I was using QQ, another online tool that I can send message to workers. But just a few years ago, everyone have been using WeChat. And we all know because WhatsApp and other apps cannot be used. They are not basically not operated or allowed in China unless you got the VPN or some other way you can climb the Great Firewall. So organizing is difficult in the sense that we lack the reliable or secure community channels. So you cannot really use the WeChat as a reliable and secure tool to share strategies. Face-to-face meetings, of course, that can be done. But then you have been working 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. All you got is a very exhausted body and mind. And the bigger the scale you organize the protest, also the quicker you will be taken into the police station or even a jail. So we really have to think of some way that is quite wise and smart, effective, but also not attracting the attention of the authorities and quickly get cracked down. About transnational solidarity, in the past, I would be more hopeful than today because there have been the democratic trade unions in Hong Kong. They are all dismantled. After the passage of the national security law, that is indeed reflecting the bigger incorporation of Hong Kong into the orbits of the Beijing government or the party state. So it is also difficult, even for me or our friends, it has been much more challenging to think of organizing any actions, taking, even I just say, gathering some signatures. If we do it outside China, that is okay. But if within China, that will still not be quite viable. And finally, I am really grateful for your sharing of the insights. That is more about culture, literature, or the alternate way for workers to amplify their voice, and that is through their songs, dramas, or poetries. I'm really grateful for these workers who basically all would have already received their 9 years basic education. Yeah, that's right. They are not fortunate enough like you and me to get into college or university, but they are good enough to put down on the paper or in the computer and their mobile phone what they feel about their lives. It's all about the pains and suffering, not physically only, but psychologically, socially. It's still very, very difficult to find a boyfriend, girlfriend, and sunk their wood, build their family in such a costly cities like Shenzhen, Beijing, or Guangzhou. Turning to religion, I don't know it is an escape or a real comfort for some, but that's true. We also notice the underground churches or how they try to express their affection or the needs, the very basic needs as a human on the paper and through poetries. So I think that is a very important part when we understand workers.
Jenny, more questions?
I see that there
There
are
some question in the chat box.
Question in the chat box.
Yeah, chat box. Jenny, if you, I think you can take some of them. And some of them are comments. Partho Mukhopadhyay had a comment on question on are protests still tolerated in Hong Kong, especially I think with reference to what you showed about corporate accountability, I mean consumer accountability in Hong Kong in organizing those protests. But I think he's asking whether those protests are still, are there spaces for those protests in Hong Kong today, post all the developments over the last couple of years?
So may I know what kind of protests in mind? Are they anti-government protests or labor protests?
Oh, these are the protests which, I mean, you showed images of you protesting outside Apple stores and in malls, those kind of protests. I think that's what he's referring to.
I see. Thank you so much. I appreciate this question a lot. This is exactly the more optimistic or positive side. If we do the book only for our own career development, that is really quite meaningless. And we do want to share to get more people's understanding about the gadgets, how it is being made, and what the political economy of China look like, and why Apple and all these big companies, they are making really world record in terms of their shares price. They are hitting new targets. They have all the new models. So by organizing these actions outside the Apple stores or on the streets or in the university campuses, because in the past we do have quite nice posters or video. We can also give a talk or have a seminar, and sometimes I also teach in my own class. Although this is not all about labor, but I still try to year after year to engage and share. These actions are also becoming really a little bit less in these 2 years or so. But I can also share with you the most recent thing that I comment is actually about the strike being organized by Food Panda, you know, Food Panda, Deliveroo, and others. Yeah, so they are highly dissatisfied with about the variable pricing. Yeah, sometimes you pay a lot less than you promise, and the time for delivery is so short. So I just want to address your concerns that in Hong Kong still, if purely it is about economic rights or there are some shared concerns among these very marginal groups of workers who are badly treated or just thrown away by deactivating your account, then yes, we are able to do that. But if it, unlike in the past, when we organize and have some coordination with mainland Chinese university students and faculty members, then these are something that we rarely do nowadays. Actually, the background is also some other groups. They are the university activists and the faculty members. They are, some of them are even interrogated in front of the camera. So you imagine how much suffering they and their parents are facing. So we must also learn from these painful lessons. Now, we try to keep a little bit lower in terms of our profile. And even if we're trying to organize some actions, maybe the discussion have to be more secure within a group that you have high trust. And the action cannot be just about getting media attention, revealing your identity. That has to be something more smart. I cannot tell for sure what do I mean by other way of organizing. But we are still trying. However, just one more information is that the Marxist societies or those student associations who have been learning Marxism, even these groups are being clamped down. So what can you still tell? Yeah, I mean, the space is really narrow and limited. You might be convinced that, oh, China is becoming the second or even, the second global economic power, right? We all know. But China is also facing the slowing economy. So there were many structural issues that China is now facing, and how to make sure that, or to believe that after graduation, you just get a good office job or you become an entrepreneur, you start your startup. These are the right track to go. And if you are just more socially and politically engaged, then trouble might come up. So we have to be really careful by balancing all different, or by calculating, anticipating the outcomes. But I'm also not trying to be so discouraging, as Annette also mentioned. In these 1 to 2 years, I focus more on those Foxconn workers who no longer want to so-called waste their youth and their energy. They want to get some more money or try out other things, but getting into the platform economy is no way better, because they don't even enjoy having an employment contract. They are just seen or classified as the independent contractor. And I would love to also learn more from India, your unions or some other NGOs and activists or concerned scholars like you. If there are indeed some joint publications or activities that we can organize together, I think that is really worthwhile to do so. And this is also why I feel a super great opportunity for us to get together in this afternoon.
Absolutely. Definitely, there are plans, and we should definitely work forward in finding ways of mutual collaboration. I see a question by Sridhar Venkateshwan. Sridhar, would you like to go ahead and ask that?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, there's been a lot of press from Apple about how they have taken cognizance of this and improved working conditions, brought in more suppliers to ease the pressure of these ups and downs. So I was just wondering, do you have any data on whether there are still suicides in 2018, 19, the more recent years after the action by Apple? And is there any kind of data available on these suicides in more recent years, like 2019, before the pandemic, or even during the pandemic years when the demand shot through the roof again?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The global attention seems to be frozen in 2010, or maybe just a couple of cases, more high-profile cases later on, like the Pruitt I show you, that had also hit some headlines in 2014 in September, when he also jumped from the building and killed himself immediately. Whether it happens in these recent years, the difficulties for us is that there have been media surveillance and the blockage in terms of some information. But here and there, discussions among workers are there, and they did share with us they heard about or they know someone who committed suicide. But the reasons might be complicated. It might be closely related to work. It might be, for some other reasons. We just do not know for the deep detail. There is one journal article, me and a group of social scientists co-write together, and that had been published in Critical Sociology, the journal Critical Sociology. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Dimitri Kasla, he find all the information from social media, other blogs, and make a quite nice graph. And that shows beyond Foxconn, there are cases of employee suicides. So I would recommend that article, and you will find some information as a trend, as a pattern over the past decade. But they are not restricted to Foxconn. There are many other workplaces that had also reported worker suicide, but they are all within the electronics industry. So I do hope that it will be helpful. And I think a bit on your very good question is that whether Apple should also bear the responsibility by preventing worker from taking this step. You know, killing oneself is never a solution. We want them to live and to live better. But whether Apple is changing its purchasing practice to prevent the overtime or the overuse of these more vulnerable students in producing our iPhones, that is something really crucial. And not only Apple, but also Dell and HP, IBM, as the whole industry. If you are just pushing the just-in-time production, you don't want to waste the money to store the product in the warehouses. You only want to get it done quickly and sell it overnight, and then produce a new batch of products in the market, and then you sell, you place the order and sell it all out. So these are the rhythm, the practice they are using, but they never anticipate or calculate carefully how much human resources do they need and what are the impact when workers are already staying day and night for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, or even only 1 to 2 days in the whole month. Only when they change from the day to night or night to day shift, then they will have a day off. That is really not acceptable.
Thank you. Rija had a couple of questions. Go ahead, Rija.
Rija, I'm learning the name.
Good evening, Dr. Chen.
Hi.
Sorry, I was unable to unmute earlier. Thank you for an interesting talk. I just have 2 questions, although you have addressed this partially earlier. But just in the context of a dormitory regime, I was wondering how difficult it is for workers to organize, given that there's heavy surveillance, in a dormitory labor regime setup. And my second question is, how do you see Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity Campaign? How is that playing out for workers' rights in China today, especially with the recent push by the government, for companies to unionize? And
thank you so much.
Yeah. And how have labor NGOs been responding to this?
Right, Rija, thank you so much for these 2 stimulating and inspiring questions as well. In the dormitories, usually it is a collective living environment that is not a welfare. It is just a system to let the workers have some sleep, to eat, and then regain energy. That means have labor power to work the other day. This should be seen as more or less a part of the control strategy. So you can bring in the workers just in time again to do the overtime work, and then let them sleep for some hours and then come back to work. And it is also cost saving, because otherwise you will have to pay a lot more, and they could rent their own private room or the small apartment in the private market. But now you squeeze the wages also to the minimum. It is difficult to organize within the dormitory as well. It is not exaggerating. When I did the undercover, I put on the Foxconn uniform, pretend that I'm one of the factory girls. Well, I'm older than that. But I put on also blue jeans and the uniform and borrow the staff card because 1 or 2 of them, they have the day off. Then I will borrow the card, scan the card through the electronic device and get into the dormitory. The security is really tight, and sometimes is on each floor. There will be the security officer, but most of the time it is the 1 or 2 who are stationed on the ground floor. But they have walkie-talkie, they have their own communication tools. That means they can react quickly. It is difficult. I would only see that when they are cousins or sisters or brothers, or when they had know each other for some time, then they will share more openly in terms of how we organize work stoppage or some other action to get our overtime wages, or to negotiate for some other terms and conditions. So it's still possible, but just have to be really careful, or do it in a small groups, cases by cases. About common prosperity, we do know our President Xi Jinping, he now targets Alibaba, Tencent, and other big tech, really technological companies, but they are all privately owned. But when you impose the penalties and fines on them, these money are taken into the states. I would say that it seems to me more like a power struggle rather than having much implications on workers' rights and their well-being. It's like tracking the power expansion of these companies that seems to be quite threatening to the authority. But again, I do not have much inside information to tell. Sometimes only the really high rank officials might know what's going on inside. I do pay some attention to historians or some other commentators. I simply hope that the trade unions, as they claim they want to organize the workers in the new economy, that means platform workers or even domestic workers, or try to make the society better and fairer to everyone, then this would not be just an empty slogan, but you put in some more substance, like reform the trade union, or to really provide the workers with more support, social security or social safety net, education and job training opportunities. These are what I could hope for. But still, that is also not something in my mind. In the long run, I do hope that the production system could be more democratic, open, and workers themselves would have more decision-making capacity. And student activists, faculty members, researchers, other more progressive NGO leaders, we can all put more pressure onto those global companies, and they would also be under pressure to give more concessions. So these are the social movement-oriented scenario that I think I would place more energy and effort rather than believing in the rhetoric or the flaming of the leadership under presidency. But just my thoughts. Thank you so much for making me think more about the politics or the political science. I have been trained more in terms of migration or sociology of work, but I, over some years, nowadays understand deeper how the role of the states is mixed control strategies are influencing or even impacting the people's lives, workers, middle class, the graduates, university graduates, and many other billions of people in China and
beyond. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, I think cross-disciplinary conversations is what I think we should be having. Ambassador Kanta had a question. Ambassador Kanta, would you want to go ahead and ask?
Well, thank you, Jenny, for an excellent presentation, very rich presentation. No, Jenny, you referred to collusion of local officials, but do you see, when it comes to authorities at higher level, greater responsiveness to the plight of workers? What kind of steps are being taken to ameliorate the concerns being voiced by workers, by government authorities, including in context of common prosperity?
Well, I think you and Rija and myself, we should form a study group. Well, and welcome everyone. This is a very important conversation we are having right now. In China, the local states, local governments, that means at the city level or provincial level, that is indeed crucial because they are the ones who manage local fiscal conditions. So how much I'm paying to build affordable housing or to adjust the minimum wage in my locality. As you are aware, there is no standard or uniform wages within the whole China. It's quite varied indeed. When I talk about like maybe more than 2,000 renminbi, the Chinese currency per month in terms of the minimum wage, in some places, it could be as low as 1,500 or 1,300. So there are varieties. So local governments are important in the sense of providing a better condition for all, to responsible for some infrastructure, housing, bridges, schools, factories, other workplaces. Do they respond to the suicide tragedy in Foxconn or some other worker abuses in the other places? The response most of the time are quite slow. And indeed, nowadays, many local governments are trying to grab the land, to take the land away from peasants, especially those peri-urban area and the boundaries or at the edge, but those land are highly valuable. So they want to take the land for, in the name of development, maybe to build a hotel, to build a university town, or simply a real estate project of making money. And I see many collusions, deep corruptions in a sense as well. And the peasants or migrant workers are being just pushed away as the low-end population or as those who are unwanted. I mean, I need your labor to clean the streets, to provide the cheap products, to make the clothes or iPhones, but I don't want to take care of your social reproduction needs. So your children, your family are not my problem. You have to sort it out on your own. So that is really some unjust problems right here. The right to the city is sometimes also what we are thinking about, inclusive urbanization or not. At the higher level, the central governments are putting quite some money on strengthening national security rather than improving the welfare in a way. I put it that way. I would say that more policymakers or other influential commentators or discussants, they are all need to put some more pressure onto the government so that President Xi Jinping and his team and the mid-level policymakers, they could be more responsive to people's needs. Their needs are not just having a job, but decent employment, fair wage, safe environment. In particularly during these 2 years of COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, everyone is suffering. Yeah, in Hong Kong, in India, in mainland China as well. And many had already lost their jobs and some are struggling on the margin, especially when the city is locked down and not just for a month, but 2 months or even longer, and they cannot get out to work. There are many problems right here. I do not have the comprehensive agenda to address all of these issues, but the central governments are definitely playing a pivotal, central role in shaping the policy. Common prosperity, if it is not just an empty slogan, then we need to know more in terms of how the city planning or the resources that are being put into education, job training, vocational education, all these are in a more coherent form. Otherwise, it seems to me more like some power struggle that is going on. Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador Kanta, and thank you, Jenny, again. I think there are no more questions. So, is anybody wanting to go for one more question? I think we may have space for one more. Okay. So maybe I think I'll give the final thoughts to Jenny to make any additional points or comments. Maybe a short question, Jenny. I think it's again connected to what you are doing with your ongoing research right now, which also you again mentioned in one of the responses about workers in platform economy. I remember, I think you had mentioned in one of our conversations that there are Foxconn workers who have moved out of Foxconn and getting absorbed into the platform economy, especially in logistics or even food delivery, which you had briefly mentioned. But you also say that it's not at the equal level, whether in terms of pay or whether in terms of entitlements. So it's a depressing kind of a situation. Is that what you paint? But also, I think some in the book is also the fact that you maybe it's also light on that fact that what happens to workers who are able to move out of this vicious circle of getting completely moving within Foxconn or within electronic industry? Are they able to find any alternative sources of employment, or how are they? Because we have seen in this documentary, We Were Smart, this second generation young workers with their different lifestyle or hairstyle and their fashion traits, but they even though they're wanting to be different in a way, it's also a kind of a rebellion, but they are still coming back to the same industries or same workplaces. And this, you have this unique case where the first generation migrants and the second generation migrants, there is a convergence in terms of how the life is perpetual moving around in circles. So are there anybody in the Foxconn who are able to move out of this, wishing to really move out of this alienation to break this vicious cycle?
Yeah, how to make a breakthrough? This is really a good question. If only they can, I would say this is a blessing. It is the hierarchical world. It is a difficult world to move up. Sometimes they only use the senior Taiwanese managers, and sometimes it is already the middle age or even more senior Chinese managers. If you do not get a very high educational credential, maybe you can only try to build some friendship, informal ties with your supervisors, your foreman, or your managers to buy some time off. So in the book, we do mention some young girls, they sell cosmetic products, they engage in direct sales, and the others just share with many others, open a small shop selling rice, noodles, congis, and some other small things. But quickly, they know they are not competitive at all when it comes to Walmarts or other huge retail chains. So very difficult with these young people who lack of capital or the market ties. I do not think they are not hardworking or smart enough. They have middle education. They have some also got 1 or 2 years vocational training. It is just the job market becomes so competitive. Even the young university graduates, they are doing so-called the 996 or some other tough jobs, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and that is again violate the law. But they also have to keep their job in Alibaba, Tencent, or Pinduoduo, and some other so-called the big tech companies. Everyone wants to be the one who succeeds, and some might find their lovers and get to a smaller place to settle down. Some already got married, but they are also struggling. They haven't seen their kid for a year or so. Yeah, that is indeed a very heartbroken. I think you recall me many scenarios, many scenes when I talk to them at night or in the early morning. And that life becomes so difficult that they really want to quit. But what if If they really quit, what would be the next? Can they go back home, or what are the alternatives right here? Food delivery and parcel delivery, the magic is that if you really got good customers, they give you more orders, then you build some customers and you will get higher commission. The wage is never stable, but it might be more than what you get by doing, double the hours by doing overwork in the factory. And that is why platform economies got millions of people now. It is not as many as manufacturing industry, but platform economy is definitely thriving in China. That is so cheap. I mean, per order. Whether there are good cases, there are few, but really not many. Over the years, I just see them going out, coming in, and getting somewhere. Because I do have friends who are now based in Beijing. There are also who are within the greater Shanghai area, not exactly in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, but more on the peripheral side and picking up again just more labor-intensive, physically demanding work. Even some get back to construction only because that is something they can get easily at hand. It is difficult because China is also moving so-called toward the knowledge economy or digital economy. I think that is also somehow why I get to more informal kind of work nowadays. But I also do not want to give up the 10 years of study on manufacturing. I think I'm just struggling which direction to go. But there is still one thing in terms of student internship or apprenticeship that I want to look a little bit deeper, because if they do got the skills, maybe they will become a technician or a mechanic or something that will hold them longer and provide them with better chance of moving up and building their family. So I do hope all the best. I do hope so. But what I see is the fact that they are even replaced by the robots and the machineries. So things are pretty hard. And commitment or loyalty is not the grammar. In the factory, it is about working fast, and I don't care about who you are as long as you get things done in the very short time frame.
Jenny, there's one quick question by Pato Mukhopadhyay. He's saying, are protests and conditions differentiated by gender? I mean, maybe that one you can take, and then you can make your final comments if you.
Sure. Hey, thank you so much for your sensitivity about gender. I see that when women workers, they are sexually harassed. Well, even some will come up to me or to other younger female workers. They are having that kind of dirty jokes or commenting on your body and so on. So these kind of sexual harassment are disgusting. And some women workers have been protesting and demanding the management to look into the complaint, and whether those managers or foremen, they have to, let's say, bear the consequence, lay them off. So these complaints are the trigger of some collective actions. But it is not that big scale. And if it does related to toxic, the use of toxic, that makes them feeling very uncomfortable, then these are more gender neutral. The group of workers in the same workshop or the same departments, they will also come up and express their discomfort. So there are some causes of the protests that might be more gendered, but the other seems to me may not be very different in terms of the expression. Yes, sometimes we have observed fist fighting, some more bodily violence among the male workers. And there have been actually riots or protests that happen in Foxconn within China. Girls or women, it doesn't mean that they are not angry. They will also use their way to defend and protect themselves. But this is a really good question. I think, I don't know, in the long run, I really hope that I can also pay more attention to the gender dimension, because nowadays when I follow the parcel delivery workers day and night after going home, I also see that it is their wife, if they do have their wife together, then they are the one who are doing cooking or taking care of the child. So parenting is indeed the absence of fatherhood, because the men have been working like 15 hours even. Well, it could be longer than in the factory, because they have to do packaging, calling the customers, follow up, ordering the materials, and so on. So I just want to put it short here. It is the hidden family labor that is unpaid social reproductive sphere that is also subsidizing the capitalist sphere. So it is production and social reproduction, or how the family becomes not like a family. That is now also getting deeply in my mind. So I do hope that I can write more and do more. About the percentage, it is a very funny. In the early days, female is the dominant labor force. That is up to 70 or 90%, because the women workers are seen as more docile, obedient, kind, gentle, quick, nimble fingers, and so on. But nowadays, after the one-child policy or the preference for sons, the gender imbalance is very severe in China. And in Foxconn, it is really like a micro or a window, a small mirror for you to see. The male workers is about 2/3, while female is only about 1/3. So that is why when some new comers who join Foxconn, what they are looking for is not wage. They are finding for girlfriends, and then they feel disappointed because brothers are more than sisters. But this is quite common in other electronics factories as well.
Thank you, Jenny. In fact, that was really fascinating. Both the presentation and the question answers, and of course, the book is in itself very fascinating. So, thank you for accepting the invitation and speaking at the ICS. Hopefully, in better times, we hope to have you in person in India again. To hear you. It was again a wonderful panel. Then I had when you had presented at the Association of Asian Studies. But again, the book is excellent. I would recommend anybody who is interested to know about both the suppliers, corporate brands, transnational corporations, and what is at the stake for workers in China. Definitely, this book is a must. In fact, it's really accessible. And also, please do visit dyingforaniphone.com website. It has plenty of material, songs, essays, poetry. I mean, all the material which were collected by the authors and the researchers, but which could not be carried on in the book, are accommodated there. It's a wonderful repository. I think this is an excellent idea. In fact, for that, the book will also have its online presence in some form. It's wonderful. So thank you again, Jenny, for speaking. It was wonderful to hear you, and thank you all for attending and all the questions. And hope we'll have you on some other topic not in far future. Thank you.
Yeah, I also just want to close by saying my whole heart thanks. Thanks for our chair. Thanks for our participants who raised the questions, and others who may not have time to pose your question. But I also likewise want to extend my warm welcome to all of you. Whenever you come to Hong Kong, please say hello. And I would likewise set up a talk and invite you to share your insights because I learned so much from all of you. And thank you so much for your support to Chinese workers, workers in India, and workers elsewhere. Thank you so much for your precious time.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you all. Thank you. Anything more I need to do, Colonel Venkat or